Unbelievable, huh? 6.5 million views.
Everybody's talking about it.
So it's such a good video. It's such a good video for No, it's good recording. Usually you don't get anything like this.
What do you mean?
Okay.
It was an hour stop.
They were arguing at a gas station.
Yeah.
And from there, somebody called the police because they were yelling at each other, or they were being physical with each other.
911 said it was a domestic.
So did they have that call?
Yes.
Okay, so first thing you do is you listen to that phone call, 911, to see who called and what they saw. Then from there, a cop was then dispatched after them for arguing and fighting, which most people don't usually do that. If you see two people fighting outside, unless you're slug hitting the person or they're beating each other, you usually don't get involved. People do yell at each other. I mean, you saw those two girls over here swinging on each other, right?
Yeah.
What did we do?
Yelling.
But what did we do? I got a little mad. I would like to have told them to stop, but what did you do?
Adults there.
Right. So that's their problem. And they're adults.
Yeah.
So then they leave from there, and a cop then looks for them. So they must have, when they called 911, they gave the description of them. They must have known the vehicle too.
Yeah.
Okay, so they called all that in, which direction they were going on the 911 call.
Yeah.
So I'd have to hear that on the 911 recording. And then after I hear that on the 911 recording, that they gave the description of everything, of the phone call that was made and how long they were on the phone, which direction they go, then I'd have to know the cop that was en route that followed him, that saw him speeding and hit a curb, and then they didn't give him a ticket.
Yeah.
But they separate the two. They didn't talk about giving him a ticket for speeding or hitting the curb.
Weeks after this.
And he asked that she grab the steering wheel.
Michael.
And she said she didn't do that. So she was being violent with him, and he was speeding and swerving.
Yeah. But this happened August 12th. She was alive for a couple weeks after this.
She was alive for a couple weeks after this.
Yeah.
But the next thing you do, the very first thing you do when somebody goes missing, is everybody pertaining that knew her closest to the incident, or in this case, a death, everybody that's involved is the first people you talk to.
Right. But it's not the cops because it was in a different state.
If it has to do with a death, there is no jurisdiction for it.
The cops aren't going to go follow her around just to kill her.
That's not what I'm saying.
Oh.
I didn't say that.
Oh.
They were together for 3 years. If he separated himself from her, did they text each other that night?
Probably.
When they separated each other?
Probably.
Well, you can check that.
They're going to check. I'm sure they're going to check.
So most likely they're not apart too often, and she's attached to him. She doesn't like being without him.
Right.
So whenever they did separate, how long were they separated for? And what phone calls were made after that?
But they were together for 2 weeks after
So
that.
if she wasn't, okay, I'm talking about from the time they're not together no more, to the gap between there and her death, what phone calls was he making, and what phone call did she make? From the time that he wasn't with her anymore.
That was just a night. Oh, you're talking about when he
Afterwards, they ended up going camping.
Oh,
She recorded him doing yoga.
Yeah. So you're talking about he came back on September 1st. What do you mean?
Did they go camping several times?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
She has a blog.
And then she's found in the woods.
Yeah.
And then he left her wherever she was at, obviously,
Yeah.
by herself.
Yeah.
Or did he leave her with somebody? Did she run off?
Right.
And then
Animal could have gotten her?
what phone calls? Well, whenever you get a body, even if it was decomposing for 2 weeks, they can tell if an animal is what killed her or not, or an animal was,
The autopsy's not back yet.
right? And then how was she found on the ground? Where was she found at? Was she in the sun? Was she in a shade? How far away from the campgrounds was she? Was there even a campgrounds around? How did the officers find the body?
Yeah, they had dogs.
So they knew the vicinity she was in then. So the police officers knew the area she was in.
Yeah.
And they went out there with dogs and found the body.
Yeah. I'm sure it took a few days.
And how far from the campground was she?
I don't know. They're not letting anything out.
To protect who?
They're not done with the investigation. They're thinking it's him. They went into his house, his parents' house.
Well, when they find the body and they do the autopsy, a high percentage of the time, they can tell how she died.
They're not telling us yet. They're not telling the public yet.
Yeah, but how she died is important. Was she strangulated?
Right.
Was she hit in the head with something? Was she shot? Was she stabbed with something?
Yeah, he reminds me of you, his mannerisms. He's such a boy. It'd be hard for me to believe he killed her.
I'd have to know many different things before I would even go further with which direction to go with it. But he should be hysterical if he was with her for 3 years. And the way she's attached to him.
Well, I think a lot of the reason, I heard one person say they're not letting this shit out because they don't want him killing himself if he did do it.
They don't want him killing himself if he did do it?
Yeah.
That's the most unlogical thing I ever heard.
Suicide by cop. They don't want him doing anything like that.
So somebody said they're worried about saying he did it and proving that he did it so he doesn't kill himself.
I'm not saying the cop said that, just a guy on YouTube said that.
That's the illogical direction to go. That doesn't even make any logical sense.
That's what he said.
You don't separate people in a state that drove from Florida to Utah, put one in a motel, and tell her to go get a shower somewhere. Possibly, if she goes to a gas station, they might recommend a place.
So what do you think happened then? They were only separated for a night. And she didn't die on that next day. She died a couple weeks after that.
Well, for me, from my understanding that this video is so good, it could have been a little bit premeditated by somebody.
And what happened?
It might have been premeditated, is all I'm saying. Somebody thought about doing it prior to. I don't know if he's involved in it or if he actually did it, but it's a possibility because this video is too good.
Well, the boyfriend didn't have
If
he
you
didn't have the body cam on.
police are straightforward. They have a domestic dispute. All right? So somebody called 911 for a domestic dispute of two people fighting.
Yeah.
Vehicle goes after him. The police officer goes after him. Sees him speeding, and he hits a curb, and he sees all this, then pulls him over.
But
Asks him to put the stuff on the dashboard.
yeah.
When they put the stuff on the dashboard,
Yeah.
then they ask her to get out of the vehicle. So they must have information where they were saying she was being the aggressor in the store, but he was speeding and he did hit a curb, because then they start asking her, did she grab the wheel, and she said no. So
Because he says she grabbed the wheel.
she said she didn't in the back seat.
Right. Well, she was probably afraid. Who the hell cares? Who grabbed the wheel?
Because it matters. It shows that he had a temper when he was driving. Because he was speeding. You don't speed if the girl next to you or your passenger is being aggressive to you and being violent with you and trying to hurt you possibly.
Oh, okay. So you think he has a temper?
He has a secret temper, or he's not talking about it. And she didn't say anything bad about him.
No.
So she loves him. She loved him.
Yeah.
And he did care about her.
Yeah.
If not, he wouldn't have recommended for her to take the van, but he's the one that got the motel.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that don't make sense with it for me.
Well, he was just going along with it.
And then they get back together. Obviously, they're going to get back together again.
Yeah.
3 years. And then they go to the campgrounds, and then a couple weeks later, she winds up dead somewhere. And they're putting her with angel wings around her. They don't have any testimonies coming out talking about her friends or anything. She has her dad.
She has her mom and dad.
He can't say anything incriminating. He should be crying in front of the camera.
Who?
The boyfriend. This is where she was with me last, this and that.
Well, they got a lawyer. He didn't say a word.
Lawyer can let out a statement
His lawyer did.
that what he said.
No, that they're very sorry, but it's not saying anything. Plead the fifth.
And he ended up being with a friend.
Who?
You said the boyfriend ends up being with her van, which I don't know whose van it is right now, and then he was with his friend.
No. No, they don't know where he is. Cops know where he is, but nobody, the press doesn't know where he is. Because the cops said we know where he is. But he couldn't be at the house. You're sleeping on the lawn. The press is sleeping on the lawn. You couldn't stay there. He had to go somewhere else.
That police officer went in front of the camera and said, "I trust you. They'll just end up back together." He knew he was being recorded.
Well, yeah, they have the body camera.
Okay. And they're only using his body camera.
Yeah,
Why doesn't everybody else have a body camera on?
they do.
So where's the recordings from that?
Well, this is my guy, James Madison, one of my cop auditors.
Uh-huh.
This is his, he got the body cam. I think this is the only one that's put it out there.
Okay.
James Madison,
Well, you have one body cam.
right.
There's no other body cams
Everybody's supposed to have their body cam on, as far as I know.
because they're all in the scene
Yeah,
for a domestic dispute
yeah.
that the boyfriend was speeding, hit a curb, and they're not talking about any of that. They're just talking about the domestic part of it. I didn't hear it. I have to watch it again. But he didn't get a ticket,
No,
and she got the van.
yeah.
So if it's his van, that makes it even stranger that she's taking his van and he's going to a motel. Because you're trying to tell me there's no other motels in the area? Or she couldn't afford to pay for a motel, or someone in her family couldn't? They didn't have any money. They're driving pretty far. They had to have money between the two of them because they need gas.
Stayed in hotels after this.
So they had money.
Yeah.
And then, like I said,
And the father Uber.
did they text each other that night? And when did they get back together? And then how did he find out where she was at, and how did she find out where he was at?
Texting.
So the so they ended up texting each other, obviously, or the police officers ended up telling them.
The police said that, he told them, I'd rather you not text, Well, they're gonna text. It's not God. You can't tell me not to text.
When it comes to two people being physical with each other, if one doesn't want to press charges, it's none of their business.
Right. That's why I think they're very churchy kind of guys. Now listen to what she says. This is why they didn't arrest her.
When you slapped him, were you wanting to cause him physical pain or what?
Physical harm.
Or physical harm? What was the reason behind it? What were you hoping to accomplish? I was trying to get him to tell me to stop calming down. Tell me to stop trying to calm down.
Yeah.
That question didn't even make any sense to me to ask her that. She's in the back seat.
They didn't want to arrest her.
But she's in the back seat of the police car. He's a man. He was driving, speeding, and hit a curb. So he got reckless driving, and he's got speeding on him.
They didn't give him a ticket, though.
No ticket. So that's strange to me. And then he gets to the motel. And as I said, she goes to a gas station and maybe she can get a shower.
I don't think cops had anything to do with it.
It's just too good of a video for me. It's just too good. It's just too good.
Because there are some.
And then when you see news crews out in front of people's houses and a police officer just standing there and they're not doing anything, it's for show. They're doing it for the video. Well, when I was watching it earlier on Fox, they have video camera crew out in front of someone's house, and there's a cop standing in the driveway. They're standing there. Who are they protecting them from? She's dead.
Yeah.
She died. She was obviously murdered. If not, there would have been a phone call from him, panicking, trying to find out where she went.
We don't know that happened.
That's information you talk about right away. That's not information you keep to yourself. Because let's say she disappeared and he was with her.
Yeah.
For one, he'd be trying to call her phone, trying to get a hold of her, or he'd be trying to look for her, and he wouldn't have left her where she was at and ended up in another state, away from her.
He flew home.
He flew home. So he flew home, and then so that's her van then. So they traveled together in a van, is what you're telling me now. That was her van. It must have been, because why would he leave his van? See, that doesn't make any sense, because prior to, you told me that he ended up being with a friend back with the van.
No, he flew home while she was still alive. She was staying in a hotel.
So
Herself. He had to fly home and help his dad move stuff out of storage.
So he left her there to come home to help his dad get stuff out of storage, rather than she's attached to his hip when we have that on recording, then her fly back too.
Yeah.
So he left her there with the van.
Yes.
Okay, he has something to do with it. If that's true, he had something to do with it.
But she was still alive.
So while she was alive, he left her there with the van.
Yeah.
Ended up talking to the dad, getting a plane ticket for himself.
Yeah.
She didn't want to buy one and follow him and leave with him at all.
He came back.
And did she make a phone call during that time he's calling for the plane ticket on her phone? They can check the phone
Yeah, the dad ordered Uber Eats for him.
for her, and she was left there while he left. So when she was left there, she had to drive all the way back by herself.
He came back.
So he flew back to help his dad,
Yeah.
and then he went back to her while she was left there by herself. So why wouldn't she fly back with him and then them both go back together rather than leave her there? He ordered her Uber Eats doesn't mean necessarily that she's alive at that point.
Yeah, they were alive.
She was but he left her there.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. He left his girlfriend there that he's traveling with to go on vacation with, to go camping with, and go different places to go camping, and he gets a plane ticket to go back
I believe so.
to help the dad do what?
Take something out of storage.
To move something out of storage. So he flew 4 or 5, they were halfway across the country from Florida. He gets a plane ticket, goes back home, and then goes back to her.
Yeah, well, that's what this guy
And then how did he leave from there after he flew back?
This guy knows everything. Let's see.
But so he flew to Florida, helped the dad. Let's say hypothetically this is true.
Yeah.
He flew back, left her there by herself, and then he flies back to her, and then he ends up leaving her somehow.
Yes. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. So she was being aggressive. He's getting sick of it with the way her personality is. There's something about her. He loves her. He's been with her for a while, but she does stuff that he doesn't like. So he wanted to get away from her because that morning, whenever he left and during this, he was talking about he was trying to get away from her a little bit. And he ended up pushing her. He admitted to that.
Yeah.
So they both have a little bit of autism to me. I like to call it autistic because they fail in some areas in the mind. They could be smart in other things, but they fail in some areas in the mind. So he left her and went back. And then somehow from there, how did he go back to Florida?
I heard he flew.
So he flew twice? Or did he just...
Well, how did he get back?
How did he get back? Did he fly once and leave the van there with her? Or did he fly
He
twice?
was hitchhiking.
He hit...
Someone gave him a ride. And,
He hitchhiked his way back to Florida?
no, he hitchhiked. He was still in that state, and he hitchhiked. And they were only going a certain distance. And then he said, when they dropped him off, he said,
Hitchhiking is risky.
yeah,
That's a gamble to hitchhike.
Yeah,
You don't usually get a ride.
yeah.
So was he making phone calls to her while he's hitchhiking?
She didn't say anything.
You still make phone calls and send texts. That's what you usually do, especially if you're together for 3 years, even if you're mad at the person.
Yeah, but the girl and the guy that picked him up didn't say he was texting.
And then, okay, so he ended up hitchhiking.
Yeah.
Who are the individuals that picked him up then? Those are people that you would speak to.
They did speak to him. Cops.
So from one area to the next, how far they drove him? That's a question to be asked. But you don't abandon a girl like that, if you have any intellect, 6 or 7 states away from Florida, to fly home to help your dad move something from storage, because it's cheaper to hire somebody to move something from storage other than spending $200, $300, $400 on a plane ticket, maybe $5, round trip or one way, than have to go back to her.
Yeah, it's a lot of weird shit. Yeah.
It's not logical.
All right, here's his sister. She's saying something. Yeah, it's a lot of weird shit. But would it be weird if she wasn't dead? I mean, people do fly back, do stuff.
You'd be worried about her. You're not going to leave a girl by herself in the middle of nowhere, just like you weren't going to leave her at a gas station wondering where she's going to sleep at for the night.
The fiance and his parents are clamming up, but his
This is
sister
before they found her.
and the FBI and speaking out in an interview with ABC News. On our reporter Kristen Thorne live in the Suffolk County hamlet of East Iceland with the story and detail. Kristen.
Bill, the last time we were able to speak on camera with Brian Laundrie's attorney here in East Iceland was 2 days ago. We have not been able to speak with him since. Police say at this point they do not believe that there is any criminality involved in Gabby Petito's disappearance. And Cassie Laundrie, who we spoke exclusively with here at ABC, says she has
Criminality?
everything she knows. In an exclusive interview with ABC, Cassie Laundrie says she hasn't spoken to her brother since he returned to their parents' home in Florida.
I haven't been able to talk to him. I wish I could talk to him.
Laundrie says she's told police everything she knows about her brother Brian Laundrie and
She seems worried.
Petito and their cross-country road trip.
I've cooperated in every way that I can. I wish I had information or I would give more. This is all I have. I need some police.
Petito's father says he isn't sure Cassie Laundrie is being fully transparent given the fact that her parents and her brother haven't said one word to police.
I'm hoping that the pleas and the begging and the community and the, entire damn plan knocks some sense into her, but she's like, I gotta speak.
Police in Northport, Florida, where the Suffolk County natives had been living with Laundrie's parents, are continuing to put pressure on the Laundrie family today by doing more media appearances. But the family doesn't seem to be budging, neither does Brian Laundrie, who is in a known location to investigators in Florida. Police say they're still processing whatever they found in the couple's camper van. Laundrie and the van were in Florida for more than a week before anyone even knew Petito was missing.
What were the campsites they were at? And then what's the distance between the camp ground that they were at where the tent was pitched and the distance of where she was? And then what clothes was she wearing? Where was her belongings at?
Well, FBI is on it, right?
Well, then she has belongings that she brought with her.
Yeah.
Okay, where were they at? And then the motels supposedly they stayed at. Which motels were they at, and what were the dates thereof, and how long were they there for? Were other people around them were there too that they could have talked to, like next door, or the motel when you go in to rent the motel? They do speak to one of you when you get the room. So there's a lot of questions to be asked to find out what happened.
I'm sure they were already out.
But if it's a random person that did it, they're not going to catch the random person at a campground. It's not going to be that easy.
No.
But let's say I go camping with my girlfriend, and then I'm separating myself from her and flying. Do you see me leaving my girlfriend and flying 6 states away and leaving her there somewhere where she's by herself? Would you see me doing that? No. Do you see most men doing that? Unless they're rich and somewhere safe, but they're staying. She would have had to have been by herself at a motel or a tent site. Correct? So he left her there.
Yeah, I can't find that.
But he does have a temper. Now, you don't speed and you don't hit a curb. Because he didn't say she grabbed the wheel.
He said she grabbed the wheel.
He said she grabbed the wheel? Then you pull over. So he's speeding. How fast was he speeding?
It was a 25 and he was going 15 miles more.
So he was going 40 and a 25? That's not so bad. But they were on the highway when they got pulled over. So,
It's a lot of this. You saw the road, right?
okay, so around a winding road where you're supposed to slow down at,
Yeah.
he was going 40 instead of 25.
Yeah.
That's not so bad. A lot of people do that. How fast was he going on the highway where they got pulled over at? Was he speeding then?
Yeah.
Okay, how fast was he going then? Was it 20, 30 miles over the speed limit?
Yeah.
If he was going 20 or 30 miles over the speed limit, means he does have a temper because you pull over. And he's telling her to calm down and she admitted to it.
Yeah.
So she'll have random outbursts of tempers for things that an average woman wouldn't. She has a temper. The girl, she loses herself.
Yeah. Is that what Caitlin was?
No.
No.
Caitlin would talk stupid. She only got violent with me once or twice. I can't remember every single time she got violent. Once she hit me, I got on my knees, I got in a fetal position. That's what she's doing. She's walking back and forth. She hit me again. And walking back and forth like she's military style. But no, not really. No, she just
Here's one.
babbling, not making sense.
Yeah.
But none of this makes sense to me. It's too good of a video. And then to figure it out if it's him, it doesn't take much deduction of reasoning.
Last week, cops said they knew where Brian was. Now they say they have no idea. How does that happen?
So they don't know where he's at.
I don't know. Right here.
You don't do that.
Homicide occurred or not, there's this gap period where he was declared a person of interest. Now, very commonly, a person of interest in a potential homicide would be placed under surveillance. That did not happen here. I'm not going to say yes why that happened, but I am encouraged to see now that the FBI has stepped up. That's why you saw the lead a press conference. That's why we saw on our TV screens a search warrant, federal FBI-led search warrant executed at Brian's home, his parents' home in Florida. That's why you're likely to see a U.S. attorney step up and prosecute this if indeed the facts turn into a homicide.
Were you in charge of this, Frank? And the search for Brian Laundrie right now? What would the first next steps be?
Well,
So now a mistake was made by the local police department where he disappears somehow and gets into a vehicle
warrant for Brian.
and disappears somewhere.
Be surprised if we see his parents hauled before a federal grand jury. I think they're all, at a minimum, witnesses in a sense as to what might have happened to Gabby. And then, of course, the forensics that are going to come out of that crime scene. If indeed these remains are Gabby's, there are going to be tire tracks for a vehicle that can be matched to the van or was at the scene or not. And then the time of death can be fixed, and that can be overlaid with this alleged text that was sent from Gabby saying to her mother, no signal or no reception in Yosemite. Was that even her? Was she even perhaps deceased at the time?
All right, pause it. No reception in Yosemite. So they were in Yosemite. So was she found in Yosemite?
I don't know.
Well, and then they're talking about footprints. Footprints don't stay around for 2 weeks. It rains. Usually doesn't. You need mud. You're not going to get, depending if there's grass. It's very difficult. To close things is a lot more of a way to go. But if there's no signal out there, he took her to somewhere where there's no signal. When was the last place she had a signal? And then the rest of her belongings too. Did she have her cell phone on her when she died?
Honey, they don't let anything out. I don't know anything like that.
And there's no signal in Yosemite? That doesn't make any sense. There's signal everywhere.
Well, this is the lost text.
New twists in terms of the disappearance of Gabby Petito, a discovery out west, and an FBI search in Florida as investigators dig for evidence and answers. Good evening, I'm Charles Scarborough.
And I'm Natalie Pascarella. An autopsy will confirm if the body found over the weekend in Wyoming, believed to be Gabby Petito, is in fact the missing Long Island woman. And as her family copes with that heartbreaking discovery, the FBI swarmed her fiance's home in Florida.
Agents showed up at Brian Laundrie's house in Northport, Florida this morning, a day after the remains believed to be those of his bride-to-be were found 2,300 miles away in the Richard Teton National Forest. Laundrie is still described as a person of interest in the case of the disappearance.
2,300 miles from Florida.
We have live team coverage
Okay, but
tonight
from last location and where they're at, how far away was she from that?
Reporter Casey Chang, live in Northport, Florida, with the dramatic raid from this morning, Casey.
Yeah, Natalie, yes, he is still considered a person of interest, but there is no question that the stakes have been raised in this investigation. The way the feds descended upon his home, spent hours inside, took boxes of evidence, and then towed his car at the end. The hope is that with this new evidence...
See, that's his car.
His location...
No, it's a different car.
So there's two vehicles. The car was his though.
Yeah.
So it has evidence in the car, but what happened to the van?
They towed away
They have
his
a van.
Mustang, the same car his parents said he drove to Carlton Reserve on Tuesday for a hike. When he didn't return home, his parents went there, found the car, and drove it home. The seizure, capping a day-long search by...
So was she with him when he took the car?
So he went home, took his car after he went home, went to there and left the car.
Okay,
They don't know where he went.
they don't know where he went. He left the car.
Yeah.
So he left the car somewhere at another campground. Was she with him,
No.
or he go camping by himself this time?
No, this was after she
They left
disappeared.
each other,
Yeah.
and then he went camping by himself.
He said he was going for a hike.
By himself.
Yeah.
Nobody was with him. And this is from what state? Florida? Because he took the car, right?
Yeah.
So he went for a hike.
Let me see what they say, where he went. Hold on.
The seizure, capping a day-long search by the FBI at the property.
They had me do at least 25, 30 miles an hour. Right in, up. Yeah, Natalie, yes, he is still considered a person of interest, but there is no question that the stakes have been raised in this investigation. The way the feds descended upon his home, spent hours inside, took boxes of evidence, and then towed his car at the end. The hope is that with this new...
So that was his car, and that's her van.
His location will be known very soon.
I don't know, honey. Let me hear this.
FBI agents removing boxes of evidence from Brian Laundrie's home. They towed away his Mustang, the same car his parents said he drove to Carlton Reserve on Tuesday for a hike. When he didn't return home, his parents went there, found the car, and drove it home. The seizure, capping a
I don't know
day-long
where
search by
Carlton
the
You know what? I would blame him for her death if he wasn't panicking and wondering where she was at when she was in another state.
Surrounded the house.
Because how did he get? She was in what? Yosemite when she was found, or there was no signal out there. But she's states across, and she's dead states across. But he ended up going home, getting his car, and going for a hike. I would blame him anyways. That's not the way you do things. He'd be blamed anyway. So if somebody else did do it, he should be equally to blame. Because I would be upset.
Yeah, I don't understand.
PNC Bank believes that if a pair of goggles...
I'm not trying to be mean,
get better.
but he's not worried about her at all. 3 years in a relationship, and he goes for a hike,
Yeah.
taking his car. And he left her prior to and supposedly went back to her. So what was she doing while he was, like, you just don't do that. You end the camping trip. She probably didn't want to go with him maybe. I'd have to know everything. If she didn't want to leave with him and he had to go by himself. But the whole moving something out of storage is something stupid to fly back for.